you all for coming this morning on a Saturday morning, and appreciate the opportunity to share some details and information about an important question in front of our community. I'm Dr. Brian Harris. I'm the Superintendent of Schools, and we've got a few other staff here, but I also want to introduce our board members that are here. We have three of them. Penny Casimir, who is our board president. Leah Colliser-Lazari, who is a board member in her first term, and Mike Shackleton back there in the back, also one of our board members. Angela Wilcox just walked in. But again, thank you all for being here this morning to learn a little bit more and get some questions answered and share any comments and your feelings and thoughts about the question for the community. Here's how we're going to do this morning. I'm going to do a short presentation, probably about 15-20 minutes, walk through quite a bit of things. I might be able to answer some of your questions or thoughts through a few slides here and provide some information. At that point then, we will open it up for questions and answers. We'll do that as long as there continues to be dialogue. I mean, I'll stay here as long as I need to. I can talk obviously in the group format or also in individual afterwards. If you have specific questions or individual thoughts, certainly I'd be happy to do that. Okay? So that's our format. I'm assuming we'll go maybe an hour and a half. It'll just depend on how many questions and comments there are. All right. So why don't we go ahead and begin? March 17th is our primary election this year in the community, and the Board of Education chose to put this question on the ballot. Many of you are aware we had a question last year that was narrowly defeated. So the board continues to have concerns and issues around our facilities, and so I want to share some of the details on why this question is out in front of the community. Talk just a couple minutes about our school district. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with this, but I do want to point out that our school district is a destination district. It is a high-performing school district, not only in the region, right here in the suburban Chicago area, throughout the state of Illinois, but also across the country. And there are a few markers that I just want to share. It's a destination district not only for parents and students and people who live here, but for staff. We have outstanding staff in this school district at all of our schools, and it's a great place to not only attend school or live in the community, but also to work here. So I think that's an important component to continue to remember about, when we're talking about the school district. Here's just a few of the high quality markers that are put upon or awarded to us. And I wanted to point these out. The high quality and the excellent instruction that our students are receiving each and every day. These are trailing indicators. These are not things that we apply for or seek. It's where we fit into the big picture with other public school districts, as I said, that we compare ourselves to. We're consistently recognized as one of the most outstanding school districts in the country. And you see on the right-hand side, our graduation rate's extremely high, as well as the final national exam that our students take before they graduate from Barrington High School, the SAT. We are in the top 5% in the state, and even in the top 2% nationwide of our students as they perform a year over year on that exam. So day to day, year after year, we are doing outstanding things in this school district. And the teaching and learning that happens is second to none. The question that before the community is, do we want to make sure that our facilities stay at that same place? And that's what I want to be able to share some details and information about here this morning. So a couple key things before we get into the details of the question that the community is going to weigh in on here on March 17th is I want to take a minute and talk about our fiscal situation. And this isn't about the referendum. This is about year over year, our annual fiscal and financial situation. This community is a fiscally conservative community. And so our Board of Education, who are elected by the community, follow that same path. They make decisions to make sure that we are fiscally responsible and doing the right thing all the time. A couple key items here, and these are on the Illinois State Report Card. We don't make these up. This is just facts that we pulled off. One of them is that our administrative costs is less than half the state average. That's pretty significant. And there's reasons for that. We're a K-12 unit district. We have efficiencies built in, and they're compared to other districts, and you'll see some additional information here in a few minutes, and explains why that's the case. Our tax rate, the rate that property is assessed by the school district, is one of the lowest anywhere in the Chicago suburban area, and I'll show you that as well in a minute. Okay, doesn't mean people's tax bills are low. That's not what I'm saying. It's just a rate that is assessed by the school district on your property that you own. Our bonding rate. This is also a very significant factor, and I want to just point out a couple things. We are one of less than 10 school districts in the state of Illinois that are AAA bond rated, and that's not by chance. That's the bond houses. They look at our fiscal position, what we've done over time, and so if we do go out to bond, if the community gets permission to do that, we get the lowest interest rate. And that's significant for a public body, and especially in the state of Illinois. I don't want to get into all that, but bottom line is, it is even a little more difficult in the state to be in that position. So our boards, not only the current board, but past boards over the last 20 years, have worked hard to make sure that we are in that position. And hence, we've had over 20 years of balanced budgets. We don't deficit spend. We just don't do it. If we spend the money that the community gives us and the state and federal government provides in revenues, and that's what we spend. If we need to make adjustments, we do it. Okay, to make sure that the education is going on a daily basis. So just some key markers that hopefully that everybody understands is that's every year. We talk about this regularly to make sure that we stay in that position. So I mentioned the rate chart, and this is a chart that shows where Barrington 220 sits with any other school district around us that we compare ourselves to. Now, one thing you will see, as I mentioned, we are a K-12 unit district. Most of the unit districts are right together. Okay, you'll see down there because of the way that they're organized and the rates. Now, if you look though, any of the districts to the east of us, to the north of us, you'll see they're listed on here. Some of them are in dual district formats. In other words, there's a K-8 district, and then there's a high school district. And so we just took those two rates and just added them together to get that number that you see there. Our current, our most recent tax rate from 2018 was 4.852%. So whatever the value of your property is, then that's the levy amount that the school district, tax your property at. It's low, and that's for a reason. The board has chosen over time, not just recently, but over time, only to tax for the educational purposes that are in front of them. And anytime we need to do capital stuff, hence this question to the community goes out and asks permission to do it. Now, one thing I will state, even if this referendum passes, we will still stay at that position, or we may even drop, because Elmhurst, the district below us, they just passed a referendum. They're going to be issuing bonds here real soon, so they will probably jump up ahead of us. And even if we pass this, we're going to stay right in that same position as one of the lowest tax rates, or the lowest tax rate in any district we can compare ourselves to here in the Chicago area. Okay, so now that rate varies a little bit on various factors, and it does for every school district. But you can see, there's other districts on there where property values are at or above ours, and the rate is still higher. Okay, so you get a comparison to see where we sit. Our challenge is our buildings they age, and they go through cycles. This building right here we're sitting in right now, in fact, this room, you can see it right there, right there. That's where we're sitting. That was 1949 when this was built. Okay, and this building has been renovated, added on to several times over the years. The core part of this building, though, needs constant renovation, not every year after year, but the last major time that the community approved construction bonds to do major renovations and additions was in the late 1990s, so it was almost 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago now. And those bonds are rolling off, hence the opportunity to consider reinvesting in the schools. Okay, so I show this example. This is obviously the high school. Each of our buildings in the district were built and designed at different times. They kind of fall on that spectrum, but with the high school being the flagship school of the district, certainly one to focus on that. And it's one of our oldest. It's 70 years old. The core part of the building, which is still here, and you can see it if you walk around the building where it changed over time. Okay, but we are at a point where we do need to continue to invest in the property and things going on here. So let's talk a little bit about what happened. I had mentioned that we had an unsuccessful referendum last spring on April 2nd. At that time, the Board of Education had asked for $185 million to work through identified projects. We had spent a significant amount of time 2 years prior to that developing a master facility plan, going through each and every building. And in that master facility plan, there's somewhere between $500 and $600 million worth of projects identified. Now, that board and the current board knew there's no way you can do all that at one time. And master facility plans aren't expected to be done all at once. You usually have to do things out over time. It's really a snapshot in time, and variables change, factors change, but it is a guide to what's possible. So the board had to make decisions. What's the highest priority here? What are the things that we want to start with here and go out to the community to ask for permission? So that's what happened a year ago. That particular question to the community was unsuccessful by a very slight margin, about 1% to 2% of the voters difference in yes and no's. But the board had to work hard this summer, which they did, and come back and think about, well, we saw these needs. We got to deal with some of this stuff, but obviously that question wasn't accepted by the community. So what are we going to do? So they decided to drop it down and eliminate some of those projects, reluctantly eliminate them, I will say that. I'll let them comment if there's any questions about that. But bottom line is, we knew we had to come in with a lower amount, this first time around to be able to try to deal with the most pressing issues. And so therefore, they voted in August to put a $147 million referendum on the ballot, which is the referendum that will be the question on the ballot. So here's the actual question. It is no different than the question that was on the ballot last April, except for one thing, which is the number right there. That is the only thing that changed from last time to this time. It's the same issues, the same challenges, and hopefully, we will have community members weigh in. Last time we only had 9% of the registered voters in the community vote in that election. Pretty low turnout last April 2nd. So obviously we're working hard to try and inform the community, like these sessions here, to make sure we get more participation this time. It's just an important issue in the school community, and hopefully we'll get more people engaged this time around. So what do you get with this referendum? And again, the three main things. One, safety and security of our schools. That is clearly a top priority. It's not only a local issue, it's a national issue. And I think we all know why, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Number two is to continue to prepare our kids for that high quality education that I talked about, and making sure that our facilities in 2020 are where we're at instructionally. Okay, and I think that's a key piece, and I'll explain some of the details. And finally, is to protect our community's investment. In other words, you can't have stuff falling apart. Plumbing, roofs, air conditioning, HVAC, all that type of stuff. So I'll go through each one of these. But that's the three things: safety and security, improve the classroom environment, and protect our investment. Okay? So the first one, safety and security. In this referendum, we've got dollars to eliminate our mobile classrooms in the district. When it talks specifically about the middle schools, we have 8 mobile classrooms at Prairie and 8 at Station. They've been there since 2007. Okay, 13 years we've had those. They're trailers. That's what they are. And they're both campuses. We had an enrollment spike at that time. The board at that time tried to pass a referendum. It was unsuccessful. So they had to put the mobiles up, and they've been there ever since. I will tell you, those mobiles are at the end of their expected life. They are, they're not made, they're not purposed to be there much longer than what they've been there. And so it's just a critical point that we need to make a permanent fix. And so the board has put in the budget here to have put on additions, 8 to 10 classrooms at each building to realize this. Now our enrollment now has been flat. It's flattened out. It's not going up. It's not going down. It's flat. Okay, so we felt real comfortable putting additions on to meet those needs. The next two items have to do with facility security. Okay, first of all, exterior. One example that will be really visible, we'd like to be able to do at all of our schools, is to put the traffic billiards outside. You know, the recent situation that happened at Woodfield Mall not too long ago where somebody just drove right up and right into that type of thing. Right now, I mean, our campuses, you know, we don't have any type of major traffic barriers like that. Just one recommendation we've gotten from our architects to be able to do. You know, that we want to avoid that. We have a lot of pedestrian foot traffic at all of our campuses every day. And so that would be one very visible thing. There's other opportunities depending on the school, but certainly that's one that would be at every one of them as an example. Interior types of items would include increasing technology. You know, technology evolves each and every day. You know we've got some opportunities to upgrade what we're currently doing. And you know, to be able to do that, it takes additional funds to do it. But one of the key items in the safety and security component, and this is in direct reaction to what's happened in some of those awful scenarios across the country, is to be able to compartmentalize our large buildings by digitally and electronically quickly. Barrington High School is a perfect example, okay? And our middle schools are in the same place. Once you get in the door, you basically have free run of the building. We don't have, during the school day, a quick way to just lock the building down and section it off, unless somebody physically goes, shuts the doors, those types of things. And so we would like to be able to do that. And architects have given us ideas and concepts on how we could do that to compartmentalize the building, to isolate some type of an issue or breach of security so it can't go throughout a facility, as an example. So again, that's not cheap, that's pretty significant, and an opportunity we want to make sure that we are able to implement in all of our buildings, and specifically the larger ones. And finally, the traffic flow. This is focused specifically at Barrington High School. I think all of you have probably experienced the traffic scenario that plays out here at 8 o'clock in the morning and at 3:30 in the afternoon. And that time frame, give or take a half hour on each side. And we got a few students here, you guys live in it every day, I know that. We would like to make some changes to the traffic scenario. We would eliminate going around the building, change the scenario here in the front with parking changes as well as traffic flow scenarios. So we know it's a challenge. Will it ever be perfect? Probably not, when you have 3,000 students coming to this site every single day. But still, we know there's some opportunities to improve that scenario, and we want to be able to do it. It's a high priority, not only for the school, but for the community, because it does have an impact each and every day on what happens. So priority number two is the instructional changes and the improvements in our classrooms that are included in this issue. One thing before I left number one, the safety and security items are about $20 million of the 147. Okay, this item here is around, let me do the quick math, it's around 60 million, okay, in this item, across the district, okay, and number three, it's around 60 million as well, and I'll get to that in a minute. So anyway, here on number two, one of the key additions we've done recently over the last several years at the elementary levels, we've implemented a STEM curriculum, science, technology, engineering, and math curriculum for all of our elementary students. Right now, we do not have a dedicated space and appropriate environment at our elementary buildings. What the principals have done, they've just shoehorned it in. Some are in the library, some are in the teacher's lounge, some are in different locations in the building, and we need an appropriate space. So dollars are in this referendum either to put a small addition on each building or to renovate an existing space to make sure we have a dedicated and appropriate space for that curriculum. That's a major, add to at the elementary level. Modernized environments. I mentioned those additions at the middle school level. We also would do major renovation here at the front of the building at the high school level. Whenever anything we would touch with dollars in this referendum, we would incorporate the findings we did when we did our master facility plan, which would be flexible learning spacing. Things are different today in the classroom than they were when these buildings were built and designed. Every one of our kids have a device. They have an iPad, and it certainly has an impact on what goes on daily in instruction. We need to have a different looking environment than we did many, many years ago. So we would incorporate that thinking into these additions as we would do them. Just the ones that are identified with the dollars in this referendum. The bottom two items are specifically related to Barrington High School. And let me talk about each one of them real quick. The number one largest instructional need throughout the day from 8 to 3 at Barrington High School is physical education space. We do not have the appropriate environment inside, especially at this time of year, for gym class. And I know we've got some students here. Our class sizes are large. We have to stage daily activities. We are not able to deliver the curriculum that we would like and intend to do because we just don't have the space. And so therefore we would put on a large addition into the gym area, and our curriculum is focused on lifetime fitness and wellness. And so therefore it looks a little different. It's not just roll out the ball like some of us experienced back in the day, every day. I'm not saying we don't do that once in a while, but that's a piece of it, and a small piece. It's about lifetime physical fitness and how you take care of yourself. And that's things have evolved and changed, and so we would like to have the appropriate space to do that. Now, that space would also be used for co-curriculars as well, outside of the school day. But the primary focus is what goes on each and every day for our students, okay? And finally, the bottom part is we do have dollars in the referendum to upgrade some of the major complexes on our campus, specifically the Field of Dreams. It's a little over 30 years old, and we have some major plumbing, electrical issues out there, as well as the physical nature of that space needs to be upgraded and improved, as well as the varsity baseball field. That also, if you go look at those two facilities, you will quickly see what we've identified as a high priority and need. And the other item is the fine arts component. In the last referendum question a year ago, we had about proposed about a $12 million addition to the building for a fine arts center. The board reluctantly removed that this time around. That was one of the major reductions when they made the choice to knock it down. In fact, that was at the 11th hour when they made the decision to put this referendum on the ballot. That was the last item that they had a very difficult time making a decision on, because it is a high need for our programming that goes on here. But we also know there was community feedback that there was a discussion around, or concern around, is this a want or a need? And so what they've done is they've decided to put dollars in the referendum to go ahead and do the design. In other words, and be able to share with the community over the next couple of years, here's what it is and what it isn't. And then go back out at a future date, a couple of years down the road, once that design work is done, and ask the community for additional dollars and permission to complete that project. But that would be a separate election. But we're still going to do the design work and get it shovel ready, I will say, and get some specifics on it and share that with the community to see if they're interested. Because it is a major concern here at this building for the programming. So that's really the key items instructionally, across the district. Finally, number 3, and I said this is approximately $60 million, and that includes all 12 schools across the district, major systems in each building. A lot of this stuff's invisible, okay? Or it's to people who visit or drive by and so on. But we have to do this on a regular basis. We spend about $3 million a year just on annual maintenance and upkeep, okay? Summer projects. We fix the blacktop, we fix the leaky roofs, we patch them, things like that. That we have to do, but it's not enough with 1.5 million square feet of school space across this district in 12 buildings. And so therefore, when we get large capital needs, we have to go out to the community and ask permission. And so therefore, this is a picture of the Prairie roof. Okay, I share this because Prairie is considered one of the newer buildings in the district. It was opened in 1992. It's coming up on 30 years old. It is the original HVAC equipment in that building, and it is nearing the end of its expected life. If you own a 30-year-old home or have in the past, you know what I'm talking about. You have to replace the furnace, you have to deal with the plumbing and electrical stuff. Well, that's where that particular facility is. And each of our facilities are kind of at a different place depending on their life cycle. And we've identified in each one of them major components that fall into this category. And in a fiscally conservative community, and our board has exercised that over time, we don't stockpile money year over year and do large projects. We levy what we use day to day for our educational purposes, and then when we need large capital projects, we go out and ask the community for permission to do it. That's how this board has operated over a period of time. Other districts on that chart that I showed you, they do it differently. They levy higher, and then they save it, and they do large projects without community input. That's what they do. I could give examples if you want them, but we don't do that here. We ask for permission when the permission is needed. So, talk a little bit about the impact to the taxpayer. As I have said, we have a unique scenario here. The last time we had a large referendum question in the community was in the late 1990s, early 2000s. And that debt at that time now is being paid off. So we have a window of opportunity here, and this is the question to the community. Is the community at the point, do we have the right projects identified to reinvest in the schools and maintain that same level, or is it going to drop off? So let me talk about this. This is an example of an average home in this community of $500,000 value home. So it's just an example. So currently, and over the last 20 years, that home has paid around $600 per year in their annual tax bill for the previous referendum debt from 20 years ago. All right. What's happening is over the next 2 years, that debt is being paid off. This coming year, about $2 million of that debt is coming off the books. So every taxpayer will see an initial drop. And that's what you see from the 19 to 2011 year. And that's going to happen no matter what. Everybody's tax bill is going to go down for that purpose because a few of those bonds are being paid off. What's going to happen the following year is in 2021, if the referendum does not pass and there is no additional permission, the rest of that debt, almost down to nothing over the next 2 years, is going to go down to zero. Okay, so there will be a significant drop in the tax bill to all the taxpayers at that time. However, the question is, before the community, if this referendum is successful, it will go back up to that 527 amount and will be extended out over that same 20-year period. It will still be a $75 decrease over the current what people are currently paying, but so that's the question. That's the reality of what's going on. Now, this is for the debt service. This isn't the overall tax bill. You all know that. People have a much higher tax bill than $600 and $500. Okay, this is the debt portion of that tax bill. Okay, from the school district. But that's the question. And that would be the impact on the taxpayer, depending on whether this referendum is successful or not. Okay? So, bottom line is, the community has to make a decision at this time. We've identified the projects, we've done the work over the last few years, and I will tell you, for those of you that lived here 20, 25 years ago, we were in a crisis mode at that time. This district, the buildings were falling apart. Three of the elementary buildings, they basically knocked them down and built new ones. Countryside, North Barrington, and Roslyn, because they were so much in disrepair. There was major challenges in our facilities at that time. It was in a crisis mode, quite frankly. What the board is prepared to do here is to ask the community, do we want to avoid that? Do we not want to go down that path and hopefully avoid that? This is where it's at. This is the question before the community, to decide whether or not it's the appropriate time, is it the appropriate items on the ballot, and all of those factors. So one point to note here, as you read on the slide, from last year to this year, we've had to increase our estimated cost on each of these projects about 5%. The cost of doing this work never goes down. Never, it only goes up. So we actually had to make adjustments and reduce the amount a little bit more because we had to escalate the costs based on the market. We know what construction costs are today. As I said, we go out every summer and do some minor things. So we know what we saw when we did our summer projects last summer. So therefore, we had to increase our estimated costs on these projects. So it only goes up. It never goes down. We do have a unique opportunity right now. If you follow the bond market, they're all-time low interest rates right now as well. So, and we would get the lowest with the AAA bond rating. So that's the question and the facts before the community. At this time, I'm going to open it up for questions. Here's a list of the meetings. We're on the third one. We had 2 already this week at Lyons and in Sunny Hill. We're here at Barrington High School this morning. We'll have one next Saturday at Station and one up in North Barrington, very similar to what you just heard. And then we'll have open houses, where if you want to come in and tour the facilities and see some of this stuff firsthand that I'm telling you about. We've identified 3 buildings where we've got major challenges that we will be able to open it up and tour to the community as well. So, and then obviously we encourage the community to vote on March 17th. So, questions, comments, thoughts? Yes?
Brian, could you talk a little bit more about how you look at the operating budget and the operating plan for these areas around safety, these three sections, safety, classroom enhancement, and facility maintenance, versus when it crosses the line to needing to go into capital planning?
Sure. It's a great question. I touched on it, but I'll, if you want me to head in a certain place,
Yeah,
please.
it's just understanding there's a, a concern, a question out there about how come you weren't planning for these things in the operating budget.
Sure.
So I'd like to maybe hear a little bit more about how that crosses that line.
As I mentioned, we spend about $3 million a year in summer projects, and that's for all of our facilities. Over the last several years, we have spent a large portion, almost 25-30% of that budget, on safety and security related items. It is a high priority for the board. Let me give you a couple of examples. This past summer, we spent a large amount of money on to upgrade our communication system district-wide. We bought radios, we had repeaters put in all of our buildings. Again, this is somewhat invisible, right? We have all of our staff in our buildings that have the radios, and it's situational across the district. We have immediate 911 access from that radio. You don't have to go to a phone. Things like that. So we're doing things that we know the best practice and, in our annual budget. But, that particular project was around $300,000, right? And all the behind the scenes stuff as well as the radios and getting it all set up. But that's $300,000 is different than $6 million, for major physical changes. Grove Elementary School, for example. All right, we know we would like to change the entrance into Grove Elementary. It's one of the elementary schools that doesn't have the man trap concept coming in, right? But to do that project, that's a major construction project. It would cost approximately $2 million, we estimate, just for that. If we did that one project, then all the other schools won't get hardly any dollars for on an annual basis. So that Grove entranceway, for example, is in the referendum dollars. It would have a huge impact on our annual budget to be able to do that. We just can't do some of these large, lumpy projects. One other item, and I want to let Penny chime in, I may be forgetting something she'd like to share, is 2 summers ago, we actually changed the door locks on every classroom door in the district. But that was a $600,000 price tag to do that. And our teachers now can lock the doors from the inside. Again, new safety protocols, procedures, we did it. But again, that was a significant amount of money out of the summer project, the annual budget, to be able to do one item like that, to be able to have that type of security procedure and protocol. Dr. Fuller has the key right there. That key is the one. Now that key is an example that goes on every single classroom in the district, no matter where you're at. Teachers can lock it from the inside. We didn't have that ability before. And so that was one thing our first responders said, you guys need to have this, right? This is something you gotta have, the teachers gotta have access for that type of control in case there is a problem in the building. Penny, anything else you wanna add?
Sorry. One comment or question I've heard from community members is, well, why don't you just live within your means? And I think that's a very reasonable question because we all personally face that on a day-to-day basis, right? Well, our board has prioritized the classroom, and the classroom means the education of our students, and that's teachers and educational programs and good curriculum, things like that. And so that's where the majority of our money goes right now that we collect on an annual basis. And if we were to shift, we only have one pot. And so if we were to start taking more out of that pot to put toward the capital projects, it's less in the classroom. And that's just a reality. And so I guess I just wanted to share that.
So as an example, if I mentioned the Prairie HVAC system, we would like to do that through bonding and capital dollars through this referendum. I will tell you, as superintendent, the next couple of years, it's a major concern. We have to replace that. It's $6 million to do it at Prairie. Now, if we take additional $6 million out of our annual operating, something's going to change. That's going on every day in the classroom. It's not a threat. It's what it is. So we would like to be able to do it a different way and keep the instructional or the annual dollars in the classroom, providing that high quality education I talked about. Because if we have to shift it to the capital needs, it will have an impact. I don't know, it's hard to measure, but it will. We know it will. So, thank you for the question.
If the previous referendum failed, then how did the school accomplish renovations to the library, for example?
That's a great question.
What was it?
The Barrington High School Library.
So, that is an example of a wonderful partnership with the high school PTO. The district didn't pay for the new furniture or those things that happened there. The high school PTO funded the majority of that. So,
And we've done that at some of our other schools when we've received donations to be able to do that. So there was no major dollars, to do. If you noticed, a lot of that was aesthetic. When we did the library, we didn't move any walls, we didn't do any hard construction there. It was painting, carpet, furniture, which was donations to the PTO. That's happened at Prairie a few years ago. It's happened at a couple of our buildings in the district a similar way.
You mentioned that 9% of the people voted. That was in 2019. What are you anticipating this year, do you think?
I hope higher. It's hard to predict.
What is an average? Percentage?
Last year was it was local elections. It was school board, it was city council, it was all local municipality elections. We obviously have a primary, we have a national primary election coming up. I'm just basing this, former social studies teacher, high school social studies teacher. I know in primary elections, it's usually a little higher. And then in national elections in November, it's even more participation.
2016 was the presidential election.
That's right.
So what was the percentage?
Well, it depends on what's on the ballot. I do think the local level, it does go up a little bit. I would anticipate it being higher than 9. Somewhere between 10 and 15, I hope. Maybe, it would be nice if it was even more. We have an important issue in front of the community here. And I would hope that more than 10% of the people are weighing in on this. Impacting their tax bills, impacting their schools. So, great question.
Well,
It's,
to motivate the public to be participating more.
we hope so. From our perspective, it was disappointing, I'll just tell you, as superintendent, that only 9% of the people made a decision on that question they were registered to vote last spring. So.
My name is Kelly Spicinger and I'm a senior here, and I love this high school. But I think a really great way to spread the word about the referendum is considering that we all use Schoology so much for all of our classroom and daily activities. And I know that even parents still, when you're in high school, do get your Schoology emails and do still check it. I think one of the easiest ways would be to put stuff through Schoology to all the kids, and I know their parents will end up seeing it. And I think you could do that at any level, considering most of us do have iPads and some form of social media at all these crazy ages. So I think that either social media or Schoology pushing would be the easiest way to get this word out.
Schoology, for those who may not know, it's the learning management system. It's a technology internal communication system that students use with teachers and parents. So just for a little context where people are like, what's she talking about? But it's a phenomenal tool that we use to communicate on a daily basis. Students use it. Now, one thing I will just say, from a school district perspective, just so you know, we can't advocate one way or the other. We can simply provide information, okay? So we're certainly use every avenue we have that's appropriate to be able to encourage people to vote. That's what we can do, okay? Make sure they go on March 17th and participate.
On the encourage people to vote, one of the things that have been happening at Barrington High School is the civics classes have been participating in registering people to vote. And we've been doing that with help from the League of Women Voters, correct?
Mm-hmm. That is correct.
And
the county clerk's offices, Cook
Yeah.
County and Lake County.
So, students, if you haven't done that and you're eligible, and there's some unique eligibility that I was unaware of. You don't have to be 18 right now.
You have to be 18 by the time.
By November.
Correct.
Because this is a primary election.
So if you fall into that category with your birthday, please consider registering to vote.
So we do have several students here today, and I know they're fulfilling a requirement. Maybe some of you are here because you have nothing better to do on Saturday, but as part of that class, they have to visit a governmental body meeting. We have this meeting posted. That's why you guys are here. I know that. But please, if you're eligible to vote, vote.
I should have introduced myself as the president of the Barrington Township Republican Organization. I'm not here as a Democrat or Republican, but I'm here to observe, because it's the first time my group has been here for many years. My son graduated 20 years ago from this school, along with the other schools, Prairie, Countryside, and so forth. I do share your opinion about getting people involved. We have that problem throughout all of our organizations, how to get people involved. And I encourage, whenever I go out and I speak to different small organizations and events, to get the young people involved. You mentioned civics, that's very important. Civics will give the opportunity for a young student, a junior or senior, when they become adults, the responsibilities that we all have, the civic duties and responsibilities that we all have, and we take it for granted because we're exposed to so much information out there. Whether it's wrong or right is not the issue. It's that we have to get these young people involved, and that's what I'm doing in my later part of my years, is to get people like my son, 35, 40 years old, children, taxes, all opportunities to be exposed to all this information. And I do want to work with you also, as my problem is to get young people involved in different boards, library boards, school boards, civic organizations, and to some extent to vote and understand and hear what is going on out in our community, so you can make a better informed decision, regardless of your party affiliation. Makes no difference. I'm not here to talk about that, but we have to be informed. And I'm happy to be here today. It's my first time. I always drive by, think of the old days with wrestling. Dr. Craig, happy to see you today. I haven't seen you for so long. You haven't changed at all. I will take that as long as and I remember the community when I was here, because I came from another country some years back and I was 13 years old. When my son came here, I was very happy to be here because I saw the camaraderie, the family community event. And I'm glad to be back, and I hope to see some football games soon, you know. Thank you for
Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
How much did advertising costs combine for the 2019 and 2020 referendums?
From the school district's perspective? Okay, let's see if I get these numbers right. Well, we're still in the 2020, okay, so we're still involved here. So how much does it cost? There's hard costs and there's soft costs, okay? I'll break that up. Hard costs are like print materials, things that we've done to share out. Where's Samantha? Oh, do you have the last year? What was last year's approximately?
I'd have to go back and look at the exact. I don't want to say it.
I know. I hate to throw a number out there.
You know what, maybe what we can talk about and we can get back to with the specifics is the things that we did.
Yeah.
So there were mailers, there were the handouts that you have here. We try to use social media, which doesn't cost anything.
That's what I was gonna say. There's hard costs like print stuff, the actual, making those signs out there, things like that. Then there's soft costs like my time, staff time, her time to be able to, have these meetings and things like that. So it's hard to put an exact number. I would say approximately somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000. It's somewhere in that range. Okay. This year we're still in the middle of it. We're obviously doing some things similar. We're doing some things a little different. So it's hard to put an exact number. But again, that may sound like a lot of money, but it's an important question. And the information, and people in this community want information, and we have to provide it the best way we think is possible.
I can tell you one thing that the district does not pay for are, yard signs that people put in their property, things like that. That's funded by the community members. The district doesn't do any of that. We also don't pay for any of the vote yes materials that you might see.
Or vote no. Either
Correct.
side.
Or vote no.
Either one.
Yeah, we didn't pay for
We can't do that. We cannot advocate. So if you see anything out there around that, the school district does not pay for that. We only pay for the stuff that's got our logo. You see the materials. That's us. Everything else is either community groups or do different things. Either one of you.
No, I had a question. What fell off, besides the Fine Arts Center, what fell off between the 2019 and 2020?
Great question. 4 or 5 major things, okay? The fine arts was $12 million, so we had $37 million reduction, okay? The fine arts was about $12 million. Another major item was going to impact every classroom in the district was furniture. One of the instructional components, and students could probably attest this, there's certain classrooms where the furniture's 30 years old, and there are some classrooms where it's a year old. And there is a different instructional impact and approach. The community, some of our feedback was that they thought that was a want, not a need. Okay, so we removed that. So it was approximately $10 million across the district to replace every single piece of furniture in all 12 of our schools. So that was taken off. Another large component was the development of the property over here on the west side of Hart Road. in the previous referendum, and again, about another $8 to $10 million for that. We were gonna add additional parking, we were gonna create ball fields, baseball diamond, and a multi-purpose turf field down here on the corner. We own that property, and we'd like to use it, but again, the board had to narrow things down. So we took off the fine arts, we took off the development of Hart Road, we took off the furniture. The other minor, I would say less cost items, we had 4 parking traffic scenarios at our elementary school, at 4 elementary schools, Sunny Hill, Grove, Lines, and North Barrington. We took those off too. Again, something had to give, and I think that was reluctant by the board as well, because those are highly congested areas, and we wanted to deal with them too. Like they left the high school on though, because it's the major one, and so those were all tough decisions. But that adds up to about 37 million.
The other thing was we had proposed a major renovation of the library space, so that would be more than the furniture, right? That would be the walls and classroom space over there, and we removed that, as well as we were hoping to renovate every elementary and middle school kitchen and cafeteria space. Lots of reasons why we should have done that, so we also eliminated those things.
So there you go. Those are, well, from the board's perspective, they're all important and critical, but we had to make a decision, and the board struggled with that over several meetings in the summer on what to do. Yes.
For like STEM programs, I always hear at specific meetings, teachers always talking about the referendum, say oh, they're going to improve STEM if this passes. What does that exactly entail? Is that new facilities, new learning material? I'm just kind of confused.
The STEM target is at the elementary schools. So at our 8 elementary schools, we over the last 5 years, we have implemented a STEM curriculum. Those of you that are older, you didn't experience that. Our younger kids right now, we have an amazing curriculum. In fact, I was out at Rose Thursday. We saw the kids in the library. They were coding and getting the robots to do things. These were 3rd graders, I think, 2nd, 3rd grade. It's an amazing program, but they were in the library, and that's the whole point. I mean, is it okay? It's okay, but it's not the intended purpose of that instructional space. So what we want to do is we want a dedicated classroom to be able to teach that curriculum. We have all the stuff, we have the teachers, we have the curriculum and the materials, but we don't have an appropriate space at that level.
And if the library didn't need to be used for something else at the same time, it might be okay. But there's a library class going on at the same time as the STEM class. That's where the real challenges are.
And STEM is active. Kids are taught. People are moving around. It's not, a lot of more direct instruction. Where in a library, you're there sometimes for other purposes, and it's a conflict of what's going on. We're trying to do with what we got, but we'd like to have a better, more appropriate environment.
I think one thing to be very clear on is that these dollars are not for teachers or curriculum or anything like that. This is just for capital projects, which are construction related. We already have the STEM curriculum.
Other questions? Comments?
I keep reading about different money that, the district is a donor to, there's the Be Strong, there's a couple of playgrounds. Where does that money come from?
Well, it kind of depends. Now, Be Strong, that's a community group. It's separate, they're separate from the school district. Now, we work with them,
It says you were a major donor. I wrote, in the Barrington publication Country one.
Oh, okay, we contribute. Okay, we do have some flexible dollars through a federal grant that we can use for prevention, and it's targeted for that purpose. So we give them, a portion. When we write the grant on an annual basis, we give them a portion of the money to help support prevention efforts for our kids. That's.
They provide services in our schools too.
Correct.
The playgrounds?
No, okay,
no,
I'll
not
speak
playgrounds.
to the playground.
There were 2 playgrounds this last
I'll let Penny talk about the
Correct.
playgrounds.
So, 20 years ago, when the district, or more than that, when the district was not as stable, we weren't as stable as we are now. PTOs used to pay for playgrounds. And now those playgrounds, I'll use my example, I was in the first class at Rose, if you will, and the PTO paid for the playground. And now those playgrounds are failing. And so Rose's playground was just completely shut down because it was failing. They didn't have a playground for most of last year.
I understand they have a life expectancy.
Okay, so that's
20
why
years.
now,
Yeah.
that's why now the board had a conversation with some of those community groups, the PTOs. They're asking, well, what is your responsibility in this? And the board agreed that the board had responsibility and was responsible to provide a playground for a school. And so the board has allocated, we came up with a plan that when a playground fails, as determined by the school district, that we set some thresholds for what the district would contribute. Now, if like Countryside, for example, if you drive over to Countryside, they have a beautiful playground.
Yeah, I think it's the third one since I've lived here, Countrysides. And I've lived here about 30 years, so that's not hitting their life expectancy.
Well, Countryside School was rebuilt about 20 years ago, and when that school was rebuilt, the PTO put in a playground.
20 years ago.
So would that be like the second playground then that you're referring to?
It
Okay,
was
so
just
now,
replaced last summer.
now 20 years later, that playground has failed. So that would be the number 3 then, right? So
Yeah.
because it failed, it wasn't because we just wanted to put something pretty there. Their playground was failing. And so that playground though, the district contributed $175,000 toward that. That is a $300,000 plus playground the rest of it was funded by the PTO through donations from the community.
So we had a partnership scenario that we played out. We're working with Lions right now. The Lions is up for this summer. Again, the district's contributed our portion, but the Lions PTO wants to do more.
Now,
So-
last year, the Rose PTO had already raised money, and they opted to just let their money go to the playground, and they told the district that they wanted to move ahead without us, because we hadn't made our decision yet when they were doing that. So I guess the root of the response to you, though, is that the board feels a responsibility to provide playgrounds for our schools when they fail.
Yeah.
We evaluate them every year. In other words, we determine where they're at, and the ones that aren't ready, we don't replace them until they're ready. It's that simple.
Is the Lions gonna be the all-inclusive type playground like Countryside?
That kind of remains to be seen a little bit. Lions is doing a large fundraiser, and I know that. I think they have some intent to do that, but I think it'll depend on. The district will not pay that portion. We'll just pay for the standard playground. If the Lions PTO wants to do that, then we will certainly consider that. That still remains to be seen a little bit over the next month or
That's
two.
how the Countryside,
Yeah.
because Lions has the more contained classrooms.
They do. You are correct.
Part of our discussion was about the district being able to sustain and support the repairs and, the surface that's on the ground over time, because we want to be thinking long-term and not in the moment. And so that's why we came up with these sort of parameters about what the district would support.
About 3 or 4 years ago, Grove replaced theirs. The PTO did that, and it is the hard surface, the soft hard, the more permanent surface. But the PTO paid for that to be able to upgrade that at that time too. So we only have a couple district-wide.
Yeah, Grove PTO paid for all of that.
Yeah.
The district did some of the groundwork, if you will.
So every building's in a little different place. They all have a story, as you can tell, and kind of depends on what the circumstances are.
Has anything been done to help with the pension problems? To go towards keeping the referendum down?
Well, those are Go ahead, Penny.
Total separate dollars.
Yeah.
Total separate dollars.
From a taxpayer standpoint,
Yeah.
probably not.
Get that?
I understand. I guess what I can say is that the teachers have always paid their portion. It's a deduction out of their paycheck. The district's paid our responsibility.
Every year, never missed a payment. Any school district, anywhere.
But it's a negative cash flow, isn't it?
No.
Not on our district, no.
No.
I mean, the state is a whole separate thing. We could have a
I
whole
can't
separate
solve the state's
conversation
problem
about
standing
that.
here today. I think that's a whole other conversation.
If you would
But-
like, we can exchange emails. I found a very good article written by a newspaper in Springfield that explains sort of historically, I learned things from it, historically what's happened with the state pension program over time. I'd be happy to share that with you.
We get very little revenue from the state of Illinois. very small portion of our budget. Federal government's even smaller.
It's from our local taxpayers.
Our local taxpayers pay the lion's share, between about 85% of our revenue on an annual basis comes from local taxpayers. And the rest, the 15% is state and federal. Here, it's just the way it's set up. So therefore, you're right, if you choose to live in this community, it's and it's like that everywhere in the suburban area. Mine's the same way, everybody in here is the same way. The school district's a major portion. The one thing I will say about this question, you were talking about the pensions and some of the other challenges that are out there. This referendum, the dollars never leave this community, okay? They stay right, they don't go to Springfield, they don't go to DC. If the community, approves this, the money's levied and stays right here. And it's used for everything I just talked about, okay? It doesn't go to, that isn't always the case with other, taxing bodies and dollars, but that's the reality of this one.
Okay.
Yes, and back.
So this is a large project across the whole district. Do you have a time frame that you anticipate that this would take and complete? How much disruption would happen to the students during the school day at any of our school levels?
Great question. $147 million worth of projects, a lot of work, okay? And we still do school every day. So, great question. We anticipated taking about 4 years, 4 summers. We would not start this summer because we would have to issue the bonds, we got to do all the design work. We might be able to do some small types of things, but very, very minimal. The major first year would be the summer of 21. Is when we would kick that off. Now, we would probably try to do some of the things during the school year. We would have to work with our construction manager and architects to make sure the environment still is safe for kids and appropriately carry out education. But let me give you an example. In addition to Station or Prairie, if we've identified the location at that site and we could work on, building that addition that would not have impact on the day-to-day scenario at those sites, as an example. I'm not saying that will happen, it could happen. We have to figure all that out, but that's it. When we're putting on a major addition at those 2 buildings, that's the only 2 buildings that have large, additions like that, where we might be able to do some stuff during the school year to finish those. So anyway, it's a great question. About 4 years, start to finish, all the way done. And we would issue the bonds accordingly to minimize that and keep that flat impact on taxpayers. We know we don't want to be doing this stuff with taxpayers. That is not good. We know that. So we would issue those bonds when the projects get identified and approved. Okay.
You mentioned that at Station, the mobile classrooms were built in like 2007, and that they were kind of just meant to be temporary. Was the original plan for them to be there for 13 years?
I can speak to that.
No. The quick answer is no.
The original plan was not to have them there at all, just so you know. But, we had failed referenda to provide additional middle school space. That's why we resorted to mobile classrooms. When we purchased them, we were told they had about a 10-year lifespan. Now, we have a very responsible buildings and grounds crew here, and so they have put new roofs on these I can't call it a building, these trailers. We have made them inhabitable, put it that way, but it's not where you want to live long term. And we're beyond the 10 years, and we've got it held together with Band-Aids.
Here's the reality. If we don't get a permanent fix here real soon, we're probably going to have to replace them. I mean, I don't want to have that conversation. I don't want to spend another 800,000, million, whatever it is. I don't even know what it is to replace those mobiles. I mean it's not a good choice. And we hope that we don't have to do that. And we'd like to have a permanent fix. Yes.
The notes on here it talks about modernizing our students' learning environments. What are some of the ways that they would be modernized?
Let me use that example of the additions to the middle schools. I'll tell you what we will not do is just add 8 cookie cutter classrooms that you would see in the rest. We would create more of a flexible learning environment, probably with some space, because you know what's going on instructionally right now in the classroom, where you need flexibility to what the environment looks like. Furniture is a big piece of it. So when we put those additions on, we will be able to have 8 classrooms going on, but the instruction is going to look much different than it would be when we are in a much more concrete, traditional environment. So it'll look different. And so that's an example of probably one that will be really visible. But anytime we would make any renovations, like I mentioned the STEM labs, those are gonna look different. They're not gonna look like a typical 1950s classroom. Okay, it's gonna look like a 2020 educational environment with flexibility and latitude on what goes on in the room.
I just want to also say that there will be difference made in the educational environments from that maintenance line item too, from all of those projects. Because if you're here, you know the temperature from room to room in this building, as in most of our buildings, can vary greatly. You know, you wear your coat because it's cold in one, but in the other room, you're wishing you could take a few layers off because of antiquated HVAC systems, things like that. So, and I know from washroom to washroom, sometimes the water's so hot you can barely rinse your hands. Sometimes it's freezing cold. Bathrooms are part of this. The water, the infrastructure, that stuff that you don't see, I believe will also improve your learning environment.
If I might.
Plumbing at the high school, washrooms, I know I've heard this from students repeatedly, you all know the washrooms need to be redone. That's a major line item for Barrington High School. We know that, but we want to do it, we need to do it. But it's plumbing is, those of you that own homes know, it's very expensive. When you start ripping and replacing plumbing, that is a major, major project. And we've got 1949 plumbing sewer right here in this part of the building. We need to rip and replace it, and it's a major cost and renovation to do it.
When you were talking about what do the classrooms look like, on those future meeting dates, if you tour the middle school, I'm pretty sure you'll see some of those classrooms. Because there's one at each middle school, and it works well for like group projects or two classes working together, and then sometimes they are together, sometimes they're not. So you can kind of have like a lot of flexibility that way. And it's interesting to see it. I was like, how can that work for math? But the teacher was like doing it and explaining it when I was on a tour last year. So if it'll help visualize it if you're not sure.
My hope is the word flexible is key. That right now, even the new buildings, the 20-year-old buildings, they're very traditional in terms of spaces, classrooms in a row, and it doesn't allow us the flexibility to have our instructional model evolve, such as STEM. If we had a little bit more flexibility, we might not be putting it in places where it should be, like the teacher's lounge at some schools, the library, things like that.
Yes.
So if this does get passed and you do try to renovate the parking and everything, how the traffic will inevitably be worse while you're renovating it. So how are you gonna try to deal with that?
You're right. Implementation, Tim. We will have a period of time where it will be more challenging, but then obviously the long term will be better. That is a challenge. Look at road construction anywhere, right? There's always a temporary where it's worse, right? And then eventually to have a better fix. So let me just give you some of our initial ideas. I'm not quite sure exactly how this is going to play out, but here on this campus, what we anticipate, we're not going to drive around the building anymore. That's going to go away, okay? Which we'll all be doing here when we leave. Not good, all right? That's going to change because we're going to hopefully have an opportunity to put a PE edition on the back. That'll take away all that, okay? Bottom line is we would move the entrance down to the west out here and then bring the traffic onto the property differently, expand the parking and move the tennis courts and readjust some of that to allow more flexibility right here in the center park. I'm not an architect. I've just had some preliminary conversations with them about how that could happen. Possibly even, we've had some, again, very, very preliminary conversations about a stoplight right out here, the same as we have over in Hart, and you can control the traffic much differently than now. It's just very, very challenging. Will it ever be a permanent fix? It will not, I'll say it. But we think we can do better than what it currently is. Same thing with the parking in the Field of Dreams lot, being able to create some better walking paths and different scenarios for students there as well.
If you want to picture it, you can go on the Barrington 220 website and click on Referendum, and then click on the high school, and there's pictures.
You can
And
see.
it's pretty user-friendly, even for somebody older
Now,
than me.
we have not designed that yet. These are
Right.
concepts and ideas of what we think is gonna happen. You know, the design work is that's what takes the 6 to 8 months that we would do starting, March 18th, to be ready for some of this stuff in that first summer.
Yeah, the board made a decision not to fund any design work up front because we didn't want to waste money if the community didn't approve.
Can you compare the football stadium renovation to this Field of Dreams renovation, please?
Compare it. Well, it's a little different scenario, but I guess I'll do my best and feel free to jump in here. The high school stadium renovation was a separate referendum back in 2007, 4.4 million. It was the last referendum. It was a very small amount dedicated specifically for that project. Now, what was interesting was, and Penny tells it better than me, there was also an additional $1 million that was donated by private donors, community groups, that enhanced it, created some of the nice to haves in the stadium, not just the basic stuff that the district paid for and approved. The Field of Dreams scenario, that project was actually built and donated by community members many, many years ago, 35 years ago. And obviously it's on our property, but it was built with local donations primarily, and it's been helped to maintain with our organizations that use those fields over time. The district still has the major responsibility and has ever since to maintain it. We have put targeted dollars in the referendum to update all of the facility that sits in the middle, as well as the infrastructure, the fencing and the dugouts and the major pieces there. We have targeted that, for that purpose as well. We always welcome donations. If there would be a group out there when we get ready to start to do that work, we would love to work with them and think about, one example would be a visible thing. We do not have plans to put turf on those fields, okay? That's not in the referendum, it's not the dollars. But if there's a community group, that has an interest in doing that, when we do the work, let's talk, right? And see if that's possible. I'm using it as an example. I'm not saying we have to do that or want to do it. Grass is fine, and it's appropriate. But, sometimes there are people that want to help with the process, kind of like the playground conversation, right? We want to go, the district will do the basics. We want to go up and beyond, that's a community group's donation.
Are the teams that are playing on that on a regular basis putting any into this renovation?
They are, hold on, they pay us an annual amount. We have an intergovernmental agreement with the Barrington Youth Baseball and Softball Program, and that just recently got re-upped, and they pay us an annual amount for the use of those fields.
They're also committed to maintenance items such as replacing dugouts, things like that. So I would venture to say that while we haven't sat down and had a talk with them about exactly what would happen, once this is passed, I anticipate that, like with the stadium, we're gonna fund an adequate space for programs to happen, and they will do the frosting, or community will help do the frosting. Because that's exactly what happened in the high school stadium. In whether it's Barrington Youth Baseball or Barrington Youth Baseball Softball or other community groups, we are always willing to have that conversation.
Are the district's pensions fully funded?
Yes, we pay our payment every year.
They're funded, our responsibility is fully funded.
Every year. The state of Illinois, the way the current scenario is set up, we make our payments, the teachers make their payments every year. The state is the one, now over the last couple, they've made the pension payments, okay? But the history here, for 15 years, they took pension holidays. That was a quote of one of our past governors, and they just didn't pay their portion in the pension fund. Hence the issue. At some point, the state's got to resolve that. It's a revenue issue for them. As you know, they're trying. I do believe they're honestly trying to deal with it. 15 years of poor governmental practice. I'm not a state politician. I'm just telling you what I know about it. They've tried different solutions. They want to push it back on local taxpayers. That's one of them. Cost shift. That's been proposed. It hasn't happened. Okay, that's bad practice too. The state's got to figure that out. I don't know how else to say it other than, you know, our employees and every governmental body makes our payments every year on time, never miss one.
I guess I would say too, and no pun intended, but, and I'm not trying to pass the buck, there's the pun not intended, but we work within the laws and the rules that the state established. And we have met our obligation every year. So.
And we'll continue to.
I guess what I would ask is if, you know, we all have opinions on things happening down at the state, and I guess I would ask that our local control, which this is all local control, isn't penalized by what's going on in the state.
Locally, the property values are dropping, and, you know, that makes it hard to offset increased requests.
I understand.
Hence one of the reasons why the board dropped, you know, I mean, they know that. They heard that from taxpayers. You know, the previous question a year ago would have been a slight increase to the taxpayer. That didn't play well. That was some of the feedback. The board said, you know what, we have got to cut these projects, and I told you what they were, 37 million worth to get it below, so there is a net decrease on the impact on the taxpayer. That was one of the tough decisions the board had to make.
I guess I would also say, you know, as I contemplated making the decision of what projects to include in this referendum and even to go back for another referendum, I have a couple realtor friends, and, you know, because we had heard that, and we all live that. I live here too, right? And what I heard from them is the quality of our school district is the #1 driver, or maybe #2 location, right, in the value of our homes. And back in the late 90s, when we had some failed referendums, that people from outside of our community who considered moving in here were concerned because they felt the community didn't support the schools. So that's what made me like recommit to, yes, we need to do something.
I also read that there's a certain amount needed and you're asking for a chunk above, and
That is
you go over.
absolutely not true.
Okay.
We did that 2-year analysis, right? We picked then we prioritized the projects that we needed, and knowing that we were gonna be needing to probably not complete them all in the first year, right? So we worked with our architect and our construction manager to make sure that we were pricing these accordingly so we didn't run out of money. If you've lived here long enough, you know how many times we asked the board, I was not on the board then, you know, how many times we asked for the high school pool? 2 or 3 times? You know, it took, because they kept running out of money. So we hope not to have that happen. We understand that there are drivers outside of our control in terms of the economy. And I would say if we get to the end and we find that we haven't needed to use all the money, we can abate that money back to the community. We cannot use it for anything other than what we have specified. We cannot use it for paying teachers. If you go back to that ballot question, it's very specific. So we can't, think of something. We can't
mix funds.
make a new,
Can't
we
do
can't
it.
make a new football field because we didn't tell you we were gonna do that. Does that make
Does
sense?
that ever happen?
Not here, it's illegal.
No.
Someone would be in
No,
jail.
but you give money back.
We have not, because in the past, we've either had a balanced budget with where we've projected, or they've run out of money.
The cost of construction could go up, so.
And we have that built in. We have contingency built in for that purpose.
Well,
You
'cause,
never know what
you
the
know, a gallon
economy's
of
gonna
milk
do.
costs more 4 years from now than it does today. That's, you know, what we've built in some inflation there. We're not buying milk though, I just wanna be clear.
1.2 million for the Field of Dreams and $1 million for the varsity baseball. So that those two together, you know, would be around $2 million to update them and renovate them.
And a lot of what will happen at the varsity baseball field is what you'll never see, because it's drainage. It's ground stuff.
You will see the dugouts and the backstop and things like
Well,
that.
and as you drive out, you're gonna say, what do they need anything on this varsity baseball field for? Because paint is a wonderful substance.
Yeah.
It makes everything look good, but don't be deceived by the paint.
It's the structural pieces around, same thing with the Field of Dreams. Just needs to be renovated. So that's what it is. Any other questions for the good of the group?
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for coming. I'll hang around if you have individual questions or comments.
Okay.
Thank you.